April 16, 1945, 4:00 a.m. The eastern bank of the Oder River, 40 miles from Berlin. The night explodes. A wall of fire rips open the darkness as more than 40,000 Soviet artillery guns ignite at once. The ground doesn't shake, it heaves. Searchlights stab upward through the fog, turning low clouds into a glowing ceiling of white. Men flinch. Some drop instinctively to their knees. Even veterans of Stalingrad feel it in their chests, that pressure, that sense that something enormous has been unleashed and cannot be called back. Across the river, German trenches vanish in sheets of flame. You can almost taste the cordite in the air. Marshal Georgy Zhukov stands near his forward command post, jaw clenched, hands behind his back. He doesn't cheer. He doesn't speak. He simply watches the barrage roll forward like a moving horizon. This is not celebration. This is obligation. Berlin is ahead. And Stalin is watching. For weeks the Red Army has been gathering here, millions of men, tens of thousands of guns, entire tank armies idling behind tree lines and camouflage nets. The plan is precise, brutal, methodical. Break the Silo Heights. Force the Oder. Advance on Berlin in stages. According to the timetable, the capital of the Reich should fall in early May. That's what the planners told Stalin. But already, on this first morning, the plan is beginning to unravel. Because the assault does not slow down. It accelerates. As infantry waves surge forward through smoke and cratered earth, T-34 tanks grind down the riverbanks and across makeshift bridges still slick with water and blood. Engines roar. Tracks scream. Officers shout themselves hoarse trying to maintain formation, but momentum is winning. The men smell Berlin now. They've marched across half a continent to reach it. And they are not stopping. By midday, Zhukov receives the first troubling reports. Tank units are advancing faster than expected, too fast. Some are already outrunning their artillery coverage. Others are pushing beyond scheduled halts, bypassing resistance rather than crushing it. German positions collapse unevenly, not in clean lines, but in pockets of chaos. Entire enemy units melt away, leaving gaps no one anticipated. It looks like victory. But Zhukov knows better. Speed is dangerous. Because speed creates hunger. And hunger kills armies. Behind the front, Soviet supply columns strain to keep up. Fuel trucks bog down in mud-churned roads. Ammunition wagons sit stalled behind destroyed bridges. Field kitchens are hours, sometimes days, behind the men they are meant to feed. Yet the tanks keep moving. Inside his headquarters, Zhukov studies the map. Red arrows stretch westward, longer than planned, thinner than planned, beautiful on paper. Terrifying in reality. He orders pauses. Some commanders ignore them. This is Berlin. This is the end. And every man wants to be the one who reaches it first. Far to the east, in Moscow, Joseph Stalin receives the early situation reports. They are better than expected. Much better. Zhukov's fronts are advancing at astonishing speed. German resistance appears fractured. The Wehrmacht, once feared across Europe, is now a shell, understrength divisions, boys and old men in mismatched uniforms, Volkssturm units armed with Panzerfausts and desperation. On paper, it looks like the final act will be short. Stalin listens in silence as aides read casualty figures, kilometers gained, objectives passed ahead of schedule. He taps his pipe against the ashtray. Something about it unsettles him. Because Stalin does not trust easy victories. He has seen too much blood for that. The Red Army was not supposed to move like this, not this freely, not this wildly. Soviet doctrine is built on control, on layers, on discipline imposed through structure. What he is hearing instead sounds like momentum. And momentum cannot be commanded. It can only be ridden. By April 18th, the fighting at the Silo Heights turned savage. German General Gotthard Heinrichsei has flooded the lowlands, forcing Soviet armor into narrow corridors of fire. Tanks burn. Infantry pile up behind them. For a moment, it seems the advance might finally slow. Then it doesn't. Zhukov throws in reserves earlier than planned, earlier than doctrine allows. Entire tank armies are committed in a single push. Losses skyrocket, but the line bends. Then cracks. Then collapses. When the heights finally fall, the road to Berlin lies open. And suddenly, everything accelerates again. Soviet tank columns begin racing westward along multiple axes. Commanders report covering in one day what planners allocated 3. Radio traffic becomes frantic. Units overlap. Boundaries blur. Maps stop making sense. One staff officer mutters quietly, "We're ahead of ourselves." He isn't wrong. In Moscow, Stalin receives a new set of reports, and this time his expression hardens. Zhukov is moving too fast. So is Konov to the south. 2 massive Soviet fronts, each driving toward Berlin from different directions, neither slowing, neither fully aware of the other's exact positions. It is dangerously close to chaos. And worse, it risks something Stalin fears almost as much as defeat: losing control. Because the closer the Red Army gets to Berlin, the more political the battlefield becomes. The Western Allies are advancing from the west. American and British forces are crossing the Elbe. The question is no longer if Germany will fall. It is who will take the capital. And under whose flag. Stalin leans forward as the latest update is read aloud. Soviet tank spearheads are approaching the outskirts of Berlin days ahead of schedule. Days. The room is silent. This was not supposed to happen yet. Victory is arriving early, and not in neat formations, not according to careful planning, but in a wild surge of steel and men driven by vengeance, exhaustion, and 5 years of war. For the first time, Stalin realizes something unsettling. The war is ending, and it may end before he is fully ready for it. Outside, somewhere west of the Oder, a Soviet tank commander peers through his periscope and sees the distant glow of a city on the horizon. Berlin, closer than anyone predicted. And the Red Army is already moving toward it, whether the plan is ready or not. April 20th, 1945. Dawn breaks under a low ceiling of smoke and spring rain. On the eastern outskirts of Berlin, the ground vibrates before the city even knows it's under attack. T-34 engines growl through the fog like approaching thunder. Tank commanders peer through cracked optics, scanning streets they have never seen on any map. Church spires rise ahead, factory chimneys, apartment blocks riddled with shell scars from earlier Allied bombings. Berlin is no longer an idea. It is physical now. And the Red Army has reached it faster than anyone, including its own leadership, intended. The assault is supposed to wait. That was the plan. The infantry must close up, artillery must be repositioned, supply columns must catch their breath. Zhukov's staff had scheduled the full encirclement carefully, hour by hour, sector by sector. But the men at the front do not know that. What they know is this: the Reich is collapsing in front of them. German resistance comes in bursts, sudden, violent, and then gone. A Panzerfaust erupts from a cellar window, a tank burns, then silence, streets empty, buildings whisper. Every intersection feels like a trap. Every block is a coin toss. Inside Berlin, civilians huddle in basements as the earth shakes. Mothers press children into corners. Old men in Volkssturm armbands clutch rifles older than the war itself. The city has been declared a fortress, but no one truly believes it anymore. Above ground, the Luftwaffe is absent. There is no rescue coming. Zhukov establishes forward command posts barely miles behind the lead units. His officers are exhausted, their uniforms stained with dust and sweat. Phones ring constantly. Radios crackle over one another. Orders are issued and then overtaken by events before the ink is dry. One colonel reports his tank brigade has reached the suburbs ahead of schedule. Another admits he no longer knows where his neighboring unit is. Someone else requests fuel urgently. Someone else is already out. The Red Army has entered a phase it dreads, pursuit without cohesion. And this is when armies make fatal mistakes. To the south, Marshal Ivan Konov's First Ukrainian Front is also surging forward, cutting through Saxony and turning north toward Berlin. His tanks advance with the same reckless speed. His commanders feel the same pressure. Because rumors are spreading. Whispers in command tents. Stalin has not yet decided who will take Berlin. Zhukov assumes it will be him. He has always been the favored hammer, the man sent when the situation was darkest: Moscow, Stalingrad, Kursk. But Konov knows Stalin's habits. He knows rivalry is a tool. And so both fronts push harder. Not because they are ordered to. Because they are afraid not to. In Moscow, Stalin studies two maps laid side by side. Red arrows converge from east and south, almost colliding. Too close. Too fast. He says nothing at first. Then quietly asks a single question. Where are the supply depots? An aide hesitates. The answer is uncomfortable. They are far behind. Fuel is being rationed at the front. Some tank crews siphon gasoline from knocked-out vehicles. Ammunition stocks are uneven, one regiment drowning in shells, another nearly dry. Food arrives cold, late, or not at all. The army that crushed Hitler's legions now risks starving within sight of its final objective. Stalin exhales smoke slowly. Victory, he realizes, is beginning to slip out of structure and into instinct. And instinct is dangerous. On April 21st, Soviet artillery opens fire directly into Berlin for the first time. The shells scream overhead, slamming into government buildings, rail yards, residential districts. Fires erupt across the city. The sky turns orange even at midday. Inside the Führer bunker, Adolf Hitler listens to the detonations and asks his generals for units that no longer exist. Above ground, German defenders scramble to plug gaps with children, clerks, and wounded men pulled from hospitals. The defense has become symbolic, a gesture, not a strategy. But symbolic resistance still kills. Soviet casualties mount block by block. A tank commander named Lieutenant Alexei Ivanov leads his platoon down a narrow avenue near Marzahn. A Panzerfaust strikes the lead vehicle. The turret lifts, then crashes sideways into the street. Ivanov doesn't stop. He drives around the burning wreck and keeps moving. There is no time. Everyone senses the end. That is what frightens Zhukov. Wars are supposed to end cleanly, with signatures, surrender documents, parades. This one feels like it might simply collapse inward. Reports reach his headquarters that some units are already entering the city without coordinated infantry support. Others are fighting in isolation, unaware of who holds the next block. This is not how the Red Army was built to fight. This is how mobs fight. Zhukov sends an urgent message to Moscow requesting clarification on operational boundaries between his front and Konov. The reply comes hours later. Short, deliberately vague. Advance on Berlin. Nothing more. Stalin is letting the race continue. Because now he sees something else. If his generals compete, they will not slow down. If they do not slow down, the Western allies will never reach the city first. But the cost of that speed is becoming horrifyingly clear. By nightfall on April 22nd, Soviet losses inside the outer districts are staggering. Tanks are burning in narrow streets where maneuver is impossible. Infantry clear buildings room by room, stairwell by stairwell. Berlin is devouring momentum. And still, the Red Army presses forward. In the Kremlin, Stalin stands alone by a window, listening to the hum of Moscow at night. The reports no longer read like a plan. They read like a flood. And floods, he knows, cannot be aimed, only endured. Somewhere inside Berlin, a Soviet forward observer climbs to the roof of a shattered building and stares west. He can see the Reichstag silhouette in the distance. Closer than it should be. Close enough to touch. The city is falling faster than anyone prepared for. And Stalin is beginning to understand the most dangerous truth of all. When victory comes too quickly, no one controls what follows. April 23, 1945. Morning fog curls through the shattered streets of Berlin like smoke from a funeral pyre. Soviet tanks roll over cobblestones cracked by decades of bombing. Their tracks grind against rubble. The air smells of wet concrete, gunpowder, and burning wood. Infantry follows behind, their boots echoing in alleys lined with collapsed buildings. Sometimes a body, German, civilian, indistinguishable, lies in the street, motionless, as if time itself has stopped to stare. Lieutenant Alexei Ivanov leads his T-34s toward Tiergarten. Ahead, smoke rises from the Brandenburg Gate. The bronze quadriga is blackened, its horses frozen mid-stride, staring silently at the advancing horde. Every tank commander knows the stories of Hitler's Fortress Berlin and the elite divisions waiting inside, and yet the streets are eerily empty. But the silence is a trap. German snipers, armed with nothing but courage and desperation, fire from windows, from cellars, from the shattered U-Bahn tunnels beneath the city. One Soviet officer is struck in the shoulder. Men dive for cover. Flames leap from a collapsed building as a fuel cache ignites. Still, Ivanov pushes forward. His men have been moving for days without pause. Momentum has become their only ally. Meanwhile, in the Führer bunker, Adolf Hitler listens to the distant rumble of approaching tanks. Around him, aides and generals shuffle papers, pointing at maps with trembling fingers. They know the end is near. Yet Hitler's voice remains cold, sharp, almost unnatural. They will break here. Here at the center, he says, tapping the map over the Reich Chancellery. And if they do not, then there will be nothing left for them to take. Back on the Eastern Front, Marshal Zhukov watches reports flood in from every sector. His jaw tightens. The T-34 columns are no longer following the planned axes of advance. Tanks from different units cross paths. Communication lines collapse under the constant movement. And yet, somehow, the Soviet soldiers continue to press forward, almost instinctively, drawn by the city's presence. Supply trucks are miles behind. Fuel and ammunition rationing has become a daily calculation. Soldiers strip destroyed vehicles for spare parts. Medics patch wounds with what little they carry. Yet the Red Army continues to surge, faster than doctrine, faster than planning, faster than anyone could have imagined. And in Moscow, Stalin finally reacts. He leans back, eyes narrowing as he absorbs the reports. Victory is ahead, undeniable, unstoppable, but it is unstructured, unpredictable, dangerous. The speed of the advance has created a new battlefield, one Stalin cannot fully control, and that realization carries a weight heavier than any failure could. Even generals whisper it. Berlin is falling too fast. The momentum that will crush the Reich could also turn into chaos, turning triumph into catastrophe if it is not restrained. Stalin realizes he must choose, trust the instinct of his commanders, or force them into bureaucratic control that may slow the victory and give the West time to intervene. Inside Berlin, civilians sense the approaching storm. Windows shatter from distant shelling. Fires erupt in districts untouched by prior bombings. Families huddle in cellars, listening to the thunder of T-34 engines. No one knows which street the soldiers will take next or who will survive. And yet, somewhere in the chaos, a small group of Soviet reconnaissance troops reach the outskirts of the Reichstag grounds. They pause, catching their breath, listening to the city groan under the weight of its own collapse. They know this moment, the moment before the final push, will decide the fate of millions. Zhukov receives another message from Moscow. It is brief, cold. Expect Berlin to fall within days. The general nods silently. Then he orders the tanks to advance another mile, another block. Because the army does not wait for maps, plans, or permission. The army moves. And Stalin, staring at the maps, finally understands. Victory is no longer a matter of strategy. It is a matter of survival, survival of control, survival of politics, survival of an entire vision of the post-war world. Berlin waits, and the Red Army is already inside the city's shadow. The race has begun, April 24, 1945. Night falls over Berlin like a blanket soaked in smoke and ash. Soviet artillery ceases for a moment, leaving only the distant moans of burning buildings and the clatter of tank treads on broken cobblestone. The city is a maze of ruins. Streets have disappeared under rubble. Pavement is cratered from relentless shelling. Fires glow like lanterns in alleys, painting twisted shadows across shattered facades. Lieutenant Ivanov's T-34 barrel reflects the flickering light as he peers ahead. His platoon moves cautiously, knowing every corner could hide a Panzerfaust, a sniper, or a desperate civilian wielding a rifle. The smell of smoke is so thick it clings to their lungs. The taste of dust coats their tongues. And yet, Berlin draws them forward inexorably. Each tank that passes seems to press the city further into submission. Bridges groan under their weight. Streets collapse. Telephone poles snap. The sound of engines, horns, and shouted orders blends into a single monstrous pulse. It is not the roar of war, it is the heartbeat of it. Meanwhile, Zhukov coordinates the multiple fronts converging on the city. He knows the Red Army is ahead of schedule, dangerously ahead. Radios crackle with reports of tanks and infantry moving too fast, sometimes overlapping. Units collide, fire on each other by accident. Confusion spreads like wildfire. Losses rise, but morale, strangely, holds firm. Because the men can see the end. They smell it, they feel it. The Reichstag looms in the distance, its silhouette scarred but still imposing. Every soldier knows the war that defined the continent is ending here. Stalin in Moscow stares at the latest situation map. His fingers drum on the table. The red arrows surge like living creatures, jagged and unstoppable. But the speed, the chaos, the human instinct driving it, these cannot be ordered, cannot be timed, cannot be measured. He realizes that victory is arriving faster than anticipated, faster than he can control, faster than any plan could contain. And for the first time in years of orchestrating war from his armchair, he feels a flicker of unease. Because when the army moves too fast, it is no longer just an instrument of strategy. It becomes a force of nature. Inside Berlin, civilians begin to emerge from hiding. Some are too late. Some are driven by desperation. Streets are littered with debris, personal belongings scattered, children crying for mothers who are already gone. The sound of Soviet boots, the clatter of tanks, the whine of artillery, it is everywhere. Berlin is crumbling, yet stubbornly alive. By midday, forward reconnaissance units reach the Tiergarten. Entire blocks are reduced to skeletons. Trees, once proud and green, are shattered and splintered. Rubble smolders. Tanks maneuver through alleyways that are barely wide enough for them. Snipers fire from upper floors. Infantry respond, room by room. And still, the city does not surrender. Zhukov issues rapid orders to encircle and advance simultaneously from multiple axes. Fuel, food, and ammunition are in critical shortage, but the soldiers ignore it. Momentum carries them farther than logistics ever intended. It is reckless, yes, but unstoppable. In the Führer bunker, Hitler listens to the din above. He paces, muttering about traitors, conspiracies, and the impossibility of retreat. Generals look at him with exhaustion and fear. Orders are given, but there are no troops left to enforce them. Every street the Red Army claims seems to shrink the bunker's world. Every corner captured, every building cleared, pushes the Führer further into isolation. And in Moscow, Stalin's realization sharpens. The war, the city, the enemy, all of it is being consumed faster than he imagined. This is not a controlled victory. It is a chaotic living conquest, driven by the instinct, courage, and hunger of millions of men. Victory is imminent, but control over it is slipping. And Stalin knows that what happens next, the capture of Berlin, will define not just the end of the war, but the shape of the post-war world itself. Outside the ruins, Lieutenant Ivanov climbs onto his T-34 to scan the horizon. The Reichstag is closer now. Its dome, scarred but still upright, seems impossibly defiant. The city waits. And the Red Army moves faster than anyone predicted. April 25, 1945. First light filters through smoke-stained clouds over central Berlin. The city is a battlefield and a corpse at once. Buildings smolder, streets are rivers of rubble, and the air vibrates with the metallic roar of T-34s advancing relentlessly. The Red Army has reached the inner districts, where resistance is concentrated but broken, desperate, and fragmented. Lieutenant Ivanov leads his platoon down Wilhelmstrasse. Tanks burn on either side. Infantry clears cellars and apartments. The smell of smoke and blood is overwhelming. Every corner hides a threat. Every street seems like a trap. Yet every push forward brings them closer to the Reichstag, the symbolic heart of Hitler's empire. Zhukov coordinates the final assault from forward command posts. His eyes are sharp, movements precise. He knows the faster the army moves, the more chaotic the battle, the higher the risk of fratricide, friendly fire, and logistical collapse. But slowing down is not an option. The Western Allies inch closer from the West. If the Americans or British reach the city first, the victory and the political prize could slip through Moscow's fingers. Stalin in Moscow is aware of it all. He watches reports fly in from the front. The red arrows on the map no longer follow neat lines. They surge and overlap, jagged and alive. Tanks bypass supply lines. Infantry advanced without coordination. Officers report sporadically. Yet the push continues. The victory is coming too fast, but it is coming. Inside Berlin, Hitler is a shadow in the bunker. His aides whisper of surrender, of evacuation. He ignores them. His mind is trapped in denial. The city above him burns. The roar of artillery, the shriek of shells, the constant hum of engines, it is all a drumbeat counting down his last hours. By afternoon, Soviet engineers set explosives in key intersections, blowing barricades and clearing streets for the advancing tanks. Flames engulf an entire block as German soldiers make their final stand. Snipers fire from upper floors. Grenades explode from basements. Civilians are caught in the middle, fleeing, hiding, praying. Yet the momentum of the Red Army is unstoppable. Lieutenant Ivanov's T-34 crushes a barricade, sending debris flying across the street. Men shout, tanks fire, shells scream. Every step forward is violent, but every step brings the Reichstag closer. The city has become a living trap, but the trap is being claimed one block at a time. Zhukov receives urgent reports. Konov's forces from the south have broken through Tiergarten and are advancing rapidly on the Reichstag from the opposite side. The fronts are converging faster than anyone predicted, creating a pincer that threatens to collapse the remnants of German resistance entirely. And in Moscow, Stalin feels a mix of triumph and unease. Victory is arriving ahead of schedule, faster than planned, more chaotic than imagined, and with consequences that no map or timetable could control. It is a living, breathing thing now. The Red Army is no longer an instrument of command. It is a force of nature, propelled by men, steel, and momentum. As evening falls, the first Soviet units breach the perimeter of the Reichstag grounds. Flames and smoke curl into the sky. Soldiers climb walls, blast through barricades, and signal forward. The city groans beneath their weight. Berlin is finally within their grasp, a victory that has arrived faster, wilder, and more violently than anyone could have predicted. And Stalin realizes the truth he had feared. When victory comes too quickly, it is no longer fully controllable. It belongs to the men at the front, to fate, to chaos. Tomorrow the Reichstag will fall. But tonight the city trembles in anticipation, and the Red Army surges onward, unstoppable, relentless, and already rewriting the course of history. April 26, 1945. Morning dawns over a city that is no longer recognizable as Berlin. Smoke chokes the streets, twisted steel and rubble replace the avenues, and the stench of fire, blood, and fear hangs heavy in the air. Lieutenant Ivanov's platoon moves cautiously toward the Reichstag. Every building along the route is a trap. Snipers fire from shattered windows. Explosions rip through basements. Tanks are disabled by hidden Panzerfausts, yet each obstacle is overcome. The T-34s push forward like unstoppable waves, engines growling, treads grinding stone and brick into dust. Inside the Reichstag grounds, Soviet infantry pour in from all sides. They climb barricades, smash doors, and storm hallways. Every room taken feels like a step closer to ending the nightmare that has haunted Europe for 5 long years. Zhukov coordinates the assault from forward command. His officers report overlapping units, confusion in the streets, and dwindling supplies. But he doesn't stop them. Momentum is too precious now. To slow down would be to invite failure. To slow down would be to give Hitler even the smallest chance to cling to life or legend. And above it all, Stalin in Moscow follows every report. The city is collapsing faster than anyone imagined. His generals are moving on instinct rather than plan, and yet, somehow, the Red Army is advancing with deadly precision. Stalin feels a strange mixture of awe and unease. Victory has arrived faster than he intended. Lieutenant Ivanov climbs onto his T-34's turret, peering across the smoldering grounds. Ahead, the Reichstag looms, its dome scarred but still standing. Soldiers signal, shouting orders over the roar of artillery. Flames curl from shattered windows. And then, the moment that has been building for weeks, months, years arrives. Soviet engineers blow the final barricades. Soldiers storm the main entrance. Shots ring out inside the building. The flagpole on the dome is scaled. Red banners are readied. And finally, the first Soviet flag is raised over the Reichstag. The city erupts in a mixture of victory and chaos. Tanks rumble across the grounds. Infantry shout, embracing, firing, celebrating. Berlin has fallen faster than any plan could allow, faster than Stalin himself could have foreseen. In the Kremlin, Stalin leans back, pipe in hand, staring at the maps. The arrows converge, jagged and chaotic, marking the end of the war in Europe. He knows the speed of the advance has risked control, perhaps even lives, but it has secured the ultimate prize. Berlin is in Soviet hands. Victory is complete. Yet for all the triumph, Stalin understands the truth of what has just happened. When an army moves faster than expected, when momentum overtakes plan, victory becomes a living thing, impossible to fully direct, impossible to fully predict, and undeniably dangerous. And somewhere in the smoldering ruins of the Reichstag, Lieutenant Ivanov looks at the flag waving above him. Exhausted, bloody, and triumphant, he knows he has been part of something larger than strategy, larger than orders, something unstoppable. The war in Europe is over. And Stalin, for the first time, realizes that the world he is about to inherit has already begun to right itself. Not in Moscow, not in his office, not on any map, but here, in the streets of Berlin, in the steel of the tanks, in the courage and chaos of the men who refuse to wait. The Red Army has arrived, faster than anyone planned, and nothing will ever be the same.